Hello and welcome to Camp Nightmare Fuel, where we explore the mysteries, legends, and the strange accounts so creepy and sometimes even downright horrifying. You know, the kind of stuff that fuels your nightmares. Tonight we're talking about one of the most bizarre and unsettling legends to come out of the Pacific Northwest. A story that begins with nothing more than a hole in the ground. But according to some, this wasn't just any hole. It was a bottomless pit, a place where the laws of nature simply don't apply. The mystery is Mel's Hole. Joining us tonight is Robert Prevost. Robert specializes in cryptozoology with a focus on evolution, comparative anatomy, ecology, genetics, and overall biological sciences. He has 20 plus years as a field investigator and researcher in cryptozoology, paranormal, and other anomalies. Mental health technician Robert has an analytical mind and values critical thinking, outside of the box thinking, and healthy skepticism, while open to various possibilities. And he's not afraid to reinvent the proverbial wheel. So thank you so much for joining us, Robert. What else can you tell our listeners about you if they're not familiar with you?
Well, let's see. I have my podcast, which is Monsters, the podcast. And we talk about cryptids and all kinds of interesting things like that. I've been, as you said, investigating these kinds of things for years. As long as I can remember, I've had interesting paranormal things going on in my life. We used to think that every house we moved into was haunted, but I'm pretty sure it's just me, and I take it with me everywhere I go. I'm one of those weirdos that walks into the woods and talks to the forest to let the forest know my intent when I'm there. So I'm definitely the scientist, but I'm somewhat empathic, I guess you would say. So I'm definitely a weirdo.
Well, you're at the right place, because that's me. Definitely me. I'm also, talk to it. But see, I feel like being kind of like in touch with whatever environment like you're walking into like that has helped me be successful Sasquatch research. Again, welcome. Thank you. We're so happy to have you and your expertise. Before we take a deep dive into this rabbit hole, Mel's Hole, let's say hello to my two co-hosts and camp counselors here at Camp Nightmare Fuel. The co-creator of Camp Nightmare Fuel, Kenny Thibodeau, also known as Lord Starfox, is also a creator of Midnight Lycanthropy, found on most media outlets. Hey, Kenny, how are you doing tonight?
Why, hello, my friends. Been plugging away, staying busy. How are you, and how's everybody else doing?
I'm doing fine. Thank you for asking. Kenny, can you tell our listeners that, because I think we're going to have some new listeners. Can you tell them a little bit about what you cover on over your Midnight Lycanthropy channel, and tell us all what social media outlets they can find you on?
Why, of course, and thank you for the little plug right here. Long story short is, if you can think of a social media platform, you'll be able to find us up on there for sure. I spend the majority of my nights editing, trying to get caught up on good old Midnight Lycanthropy. 12 more episodes to go in the oven. Then I can finally air stuff when it's actually recorded, which has been my goal. I cover missing people. Also, I tend to specialize in modern day and prehistoric predator behaviorisms. Also, any animal sightings that could fall into the strange category, whether it's dogmen or shapeshifters, etc. I really try to focus on those topics over at Midnight Lycanthropy as an investigative photojournalist.
Awesome. And it is a great channel, and I'm in several of your episodes, and I really enjoy working with you, Kenny. So thank you for being here also. Brian, how are you doing tonight, first of all, my friend?
My Bigfoot sister, it's always good to talk to you. I'm doing good, and things are going well. Yourself?
I'm doing fine. Can you tell our listeners, again, if we have new listeners and they're not familiar with who Brian Barber is, you have a channel called Bigfoot's Barbershop. And can you just tell our listeners a little bit about your channel and some of the things that you cover on there and what they can expect to see on it?
As far as the channel goes, mostly just live stream right now, which comes off of Bigfoot Outlaw for Grizzly Chris, which thanks to Barb, as a matter of fact, it was kind of where my YouTube actually kind of kicked off, was doing her show, Open the Door over there. And luckily we've been friends since. So Bigfoot's the main thing for me, has been since I was little and continues to do so.
And Brian, what nights are your shows so our viewers can tune in over there, your live shows? When are they?
They're on Friday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern. You can either catch my YouTube channel or Bigfoot Outlaw.
Okay, awesome. Without further ado, let's take a dive down the rabbit hole that is Mel's Hole. The account of Mel's Hole first appeared in 1997 when a man calling himself Mel Waters phoned into Art Bell's late night radio show, Coast to Coast AM. Mel Waters was then invited to tell the story and give updates in a series of interviews by Art Bell. As the story goes, Mel claimed that he owned property near Ellensburg in Washington State. On his land, he said there was a massive, perfectly round hole. It was 9 feet, 9 inches in diameter. He claimed that there was a retaining wall that was built around it, down about 15 feet under the ground. But after that, just complete darkness. Now, Mel claims to have lowered spools of fishing line down the hole, weighed down with a roll of lifesavers, and he was looking for water and, of course, the bottom of the hole, but no amount of fishing line was ever long enough to reach the bottom, nor was water ever found. After unfurling a total of 80,000 feet of line, going down 15 miles into the earth, he still did not reach the bottom. Now, what made it even more unusual wasn't just its size or its depth. It's what happened when things were thrown into the hole. Neighbors say, as far back as anyone can recall, way before Mel Waters even purchased the property, locals used it as sort of a trash dump, where they would throw everything into this pit and it seemed to swallow everything. We're talking about, garbage, household garbage, old appliances, large appliances. And even the occasional vehicle went down into the hole, swallowed up, and never to be seen again. The hole was even used as a burial ground for deceased animals. However, live animals acted very fearful and really just tried to stay away from it. Several people actually reported becoming very ill when they were in close proximity to the hole. However, plants and foliage around the hole really seemed to flourish at an unusual rate. Now, was this possibly due to high levels of radioactivity that were detected in the hole? I'm going to ask Robert about that in a little bit. The most chilling part, some even claimed that animals that were dropped into the hole, animals that had been deceased, came back alive. A real-life pet cemetery, if you will. Allegedly, a neighbor's dog passed away and its body was thrown down into the hole. However, the animal was later found running through the woods as if nothing had happened to it. Although the dog's owner was very certain that it was his dog, he said that the dog's behavior was very different than before it had passed away. The dog acted as if he had no idea who the owner was. Mel Waters reported that strange, unexplainable energy seemed to be coming from the hole. Radios behaved oddly around it. Rarely could you get a clear transmission. However, one day Mel claimed that he had a radio playing next to the hole when he tuned into a perfectly clear transmission of what he described as sort of like old-timey music. And when he changed the channel, he found an equally clear broadcast of a baseball game. So he listened, and the clarity of the audio of the game was not the only odd thing. As Mel continued to listen, he discovered that the date of the broadcast of the game was actually 1967, which was 30 years prior to the present day time that Mel, in 1997, that Mel And he claimed that there was no mention that this was, a rebroadcast or anything. Now, Mel claimed that government agents soon got involved, seizing his land and silencing him. Now, according to the book entitled Weird Washington, and it's authored by Jeff Davis and Al Eufrasio, a few days after Mel's broadcast on Coast to Coast, he called Art Bell, Mr. Bell, to update him on a strange situation. Mel had actually gone into nearby Ellensburg to stay for a few days to do the phone interview for Coast to Coast with Art Bell. Mel claimed that the day after the interview, when he returned to his home, there was a military blockade across his home's driveway. Soldiers were guarding it, and they turned him away, claiming that there was an airplane crash up in the hills above his property that was being investigated. And they said absolutely could not cross that barricade. So obviously, Mel became very upset and demanded to speak to the person in charge. So out walked a man in civilian clothes. He quickly gave Mel an ultimatum: leave the property immediately or be faced with criminal charges. The man told Mel that Mel didn't actually own the property at that point. It had been seized. Now, when Mel protested, the man went on to say that if Mel continued to try to get onto the property, he would be charged with illegal activities, like an illegal drug lab that was to be found, that could have been found on the property. He basically threatened him with all these scenarios that Mel was thinking, well, I guess they're just going to make up these charges on me. Mel threatened to go to the press, but the man called his bluff. He said, go ahead. No one's going to believe you. A few days after that, Mel called Art Bell with the update, and he told Art that a neighbor had claimed to have seen a beam of light shining up from the deep recessed hole of the earth. But there was no physical proof or record of this that's ever been found, so we don't know if that actually, occurred or not. However, Art Bell and Mel shared with listeners that the radio show had actually sent out a team of investigators with a television crew to the area to try to find the hole. They did not ever locate the hole, but they did indeed find evidence of military activity. And there was actually a wide swath over the area that was considered a no-fly zone. And in fact, visual mapping system that was used at the time, it was called Terra Server. It was pre, Google Earth and Google Maps. It did show the entire area as being like blacked out or blurred out. No one would be able to look at, to view it. And this was actually verified by the investigators from Coast to Coast. Art's investigation team also found that this part of Washington state had many reports of strange incidents with the paranormal, as well as a long and extensive history of UFO and similar activity occurring. Art Bell suggested that this hole may be a portal to another dimension, while listeners surmised it may be an entry to Middle Earth. Mel continued with a series of updates to Art's Coast to Coast, and several listeners suggested to Mel that he might want to refrain from giving out any more information, as it was very easy to find, based on his descriptions. So Mel soon contacted Art to tell him that he had received an offer from someone to lease the property in perpetuity for $3 million each year. Melwater said he was forced to sign a non-disclosure agreement, and the leasee demanded that he leave the property, leave the country actually, and never return. And he was not allowed to discuss, unfortunately was not allowed to discuss any more details. Mel stated that he had taken the deal, which would allow him to fulfill his lifelong dream of moving to Australia, where he kind of wanted to grow medicinal plants and start a wombat reserve. Now, Robert, you have been researching this place extensively. Is there anything that I've just shared that you think is, it's different what your research has revealed? And what else can you tell us about Mel's hole?
No, there's not really anything different. I mean, you pretty much hit on all the highlights of everything that I had. There was some reports of compasses going pretty crazy whenever they got around or anywhere close to the hole referred to as Mel's hole. And you did hit on that animals avoided it. Even birds refused to fly over it. Dogs were scared to get anywhere near it. Deer, other wildlife stayed completely away from the hole. You were referring to the possibility of radiation. And whenever we look at the strange radio anomalies, the plant growth, the animals, I lean more towards electromagnetic activity rather than just straight on radiation. I don't know how you feel about that, but that's about where I'm at on that. As far as everything else, you covered pretty much everything that I covered. There was the part where Mel was trying to get back to his family. I forget what it was for, but there was a incident on a bus where everybody was removed from the bus, and something happened that he ended up blacking out for 12 days. And whenever he did come back around, according to Mel Waters, he was in San Francisco. He had puncture marks in his arms from where they had given him IVs or intravenous strips, and he had some teeth missing too, and definitely quite a bit of missing time. So, yeah, you nailed it on pretty much all of that. I did find it interesting about the dark beam that was reported. That has actually popped up before. I believe there was a report from around Mount Shasta that had another account with a dark beam coming out of it. I'm going to hand that back over to you, because you pretty much nailed everything that I had as far as my notes on Melfold too.
Okay, great. Because you know how it is when you're researching something, especially of this nature, and you kind of have to sift through all of the information that you can find. We don't really know exactly what happened. There's things that we do know. We know that there is a gentleman that claimed he was named Mel Waters and has made all these claims. There's, proof of the episodes, the radio episodes. So yeah, what had happened with the situation that you were talking about is, he missed, allegedly, or what supposedly happened is Mel, he really missed living in the United States. He missed his friends and his family, and he just came for a visit, but somehow authorities found out. And that was when he went on the bus trip, I believe, with his son, and ended up in, like you had said, in San Francisco, and all of that. Then, the 12 days missing from time. And when he woke up, he was very groggy. He had, looked to be intravenous holes in his arms, and then all of the missing teeth. When he got back to the area, unfortunately, the local government had informed him that they had seized his property. It was no longer under his ownership. He was charged with illegal and non-permitted construction of roads, wells, septic systems, things like that, similar infrastructure that you would need permits on, even though all of this was built without Mel's knowledge or permission. I mean, he wasn't even in the country, because he was still the legal owner of the property. He was still held responsible, and we can all just come to our own conclusions why that went down like it did. I mean, that's, that in itself is pretty suspicious, right? I was not aware that this is actually not the end of the story. There was actually a second hole that Mel Waters was involved in investigating, with equally, if not more, bizarre details reported. But I'm going to cover that in the next episode of Camp Nightmare Fuel, and we're going to have Robert back. So, you know what, Robert, I don't have an opinion really about the radioactivity, like that situation, because you're a biologist. I am not, and I don't know how that works, but I feel like I agree with you that if it's something more like, something with the electromagnetic fields, because particularly that would be something that would affect compasses, right?
Yeah, that's true. The electromagnetic field would definitely affect compasses. If we look at just standard radiation, even radiation incidents like, Chernobyl, and we look at the area now where they even talk about Chernobyl's wolves and the deer and the other animals that are in the area, where we see levels of radiation that we consider to be dangerous to us are not really so much of an issue for those animals. They're actually adapting to those levels of radiation quite well. And we do know that plant life does absorb radiation quite well and deals with it. Electromagnetic activity is a type of radiation. That's basically what drives the sun, is electromagnetic radiation. If you have that and you look at the different elements of the evidence and you see that, plants grow very well in the area, animals avoid the area, there's strange radio anomalies that are going on, compasses go nuts. Honestly, even that beam of dark energy shooting out of there, that leads me to believe that this is something more electromagnetic than anything else.
It is very kind of, again, suspicious. And I don't think it's a coincidence that there has been similar beams of light reported actually around Mount Hood, Mount Rainier, and then, Mount Shasta, kind of this whole Pacific Northwest and down into California. It's just this line of volcanoes, and there seems to always be some weird light anomalies that that come out of them. And I feel like this claim was made at a time where it wasn't easy back in 1997. You didn't just pull things up on the internet and find out information like we do today. So for a neighbor of Mel's to make this claim, I thought that kind of, I don't know, to me it lent to the mysterious situation about this. Star Fox, what do you think about all of this at this point?
This is definitely a way out of something that I have much knowledge base on. I pretty much have heard what both of you presented. Very interesting stuff. It is bizarre for sure. I guess being a very grounded individual, I would have to say I'm skeptical about certain aspects of things that did occur. As I said, it sounds fascinating. Mel seems interesting, yet anyone can seem interesting on a phone call. For the most part, I have not really heard of anyone else besides Mel speaking about all this. Again, sounds very interesting, yet it's super hard to take people at face value without more to dive onto. Meaning, yes, I understand there's large holes and cave systems and such. I know Castle Hauschka has some pretty interesting things that are going on. Yet when I look at Castle Hauschka, I can look at so many people that speak about it, whether it's the SS, whether it's the British, whether it's the good old US of A. You can see the list goes on. Local villagers over there. Yet when it comes to something like Mel's Hole, it's just him speaking about it. I wish I could have more information presented to me, and I also have some questions I would like to present to him.
Yeah, all good points. I did want to share that this is an account from Seattle's Museum of the Mysteries, and it is written by Charlotte Lefevre and Philip Lipsum. And this is what they had to say. We heard that individuals had looked for Mel's Hole, but after brief attempts, gave up. We ourselves didn't start looking for the hole until 2001, when Red Elk related to us that his father had shown him the hole over 40 years ago, and he could take us to the general location. He took us to a yellow gate on Manitash Ridge and said this was the area that had been blocked off soon after Mel Waters related his story on the radio. We have heard reports from dirt bikers of a hole on the ridge in the same general area, but they consider the hole a nuisance and a spot that they avoid. We've searched the ridge half a dozen times over the past years, visiting the nearby Manitash Ridge Observatory, finding empty shacks, rescuing owls, and even locating a mining shaft that we believe many may have mistaken for Mel's Hole. We've also heard stories of a goat man, of Civil War slaves hiding out in the canyon, even of recent moonshining and people still panning for gold. Indeed, geologically, Ellensburg is on the edge of an ancient oceanic plate, and there are rare gems that are called Ellensburg Blue. They're found only in this 25-mile stretch in Ellensburg. With the gold digging and negate mining, moonshining, and other activities in the area. It's no wonder locals do not give out their secrets. It's likely the handful of locals who do know of the hole know it is a dump site and are not likely to divulge its location. The ridge had property owned by the Department of Natural Resources and the lumber industry. So private property is dispersed among the acres in a very unmarked territory. With the exception of the houses near Manitash Road, there's no electricity in the area, making it very much a survivalist type of an area and indeed harder to locate the area of the hole. We can, of course, verify the paranormal activities attributed to Mel's Hole, but we do think it exists and may very well be a volcanic vent hole. Indeed, 2 cave systems and 4 fault lines since have been found on the ridge. And again, this is an account from Charlotte Lefevre and Philip Lipsum, and this is in Seattle's Museum of the Mysteries. Brian, have you heard of Mel's Hole, this phenomena, and what are your thoughts on it?
This is so tricky. You guys are getting me on this one. I think I know more about Mel's other hole than I do this one. There's so many.
Yeah.
Because I do remember reading about it and watching a lot of videos, but I don't remember which tests were done at which site. Wasn't there like 25 miles of cable dropped and there was a temperature variance? They used an ice cube to demonstrate. And
yeah, that was the second hole, I believe. Is that right, Robert? I believe that was the second hole.
Yes, that's absolutely right. They did like a bucket of ice on the second one, which turned out really interesting. We'll get into that on the next one.
Yes, we will. Very interesting.
Now, did they cover the first hole? Isn't that the rumor?
That's the rumor. If it even exists, I mean, I'm here. Being here in Washington State, there's a lot of claims, and they kind of consistently will come up that, people, they claim to have found Mel's Hole. If you go on TikTok, or any of the social media, YouTube, Facebook, a lot of times you'll find some accounts that people have found it and different, photographs and whatnot.
Yeah. You always see TikToks about people and YouTube videos of people flying drones down it. But I couldn't remember if it was the first one where they used not LiDAR, but some kind of satellite imagery where it looked like it was freshly covered from when the military left.
Robert, do you know anything about that?
I do know that there was a group who believed that they had found the exact area because Mel had mentioned that there were 2 old buildings that were falling down. One had collapsed due to snow load. And then there was it was a large hole in the ground, but they felt like it was possibly a cistern or something, but it was approximately 9 feet. But this kind of leads me to another thought on Mel's Hole and some of these. What if these anomalies like this are rather intermittent? What if they occur for a certain period of time and then kind of switch off for a while, come back on? I mean, what if the whole... I know it sounds kind of goofy, but, it's kind of like the idea of the monster under your bed. Well, where the hell did the monster under your bed come from? Right. Or the monster in your closet. So what if this hole 90% of the time or, 50% of the time, whatever, is just this deep cistern, but then for some unknown reason becomes this bottomless pit into another dimension, another realm. It's all speculation. Even the story itself is really more of, folklore and urban legend. It makes you wonder. It makes you wonder about your reality. It makes us question reality. And I think that's really the most enduring thing about the story of Mel's Hole.
Well, it's not that far-fetched if you think about it, because of the fact that just how the earth functions in general, where you've got like the Great Lakes, water level rises, water level falls, and then you got volcanoes that erupt, and then they don't do nothing for hundreds of years, and all of a sudden they pop off. So maybe that's part of this phenomenon.
I wonder, I agree with you, Robert. We just don't know. Is this some sort of, as crazy as it may sound to say, is it a portal to another dimension? Who knows? I feel like we were, Robert and I were talking before the show, and we really have to be, I think, kind of careful as researchers in this sort of, if you shut off the potential, of something existing, you just like, no, I'm not even going to go there. I'm not even going to think about that. That doesn't exist. When you're talking about this kind of stuff, you are then removing the possibility of data and the possibility of it being further discussed, which may lead you to the conclusion.
Absolutely. I mean, if you look at, something simple as our senses, like vision. Vision is probably one of the most deceptive of our senses. We think we understand our universe, our world around us based on what we see, but that's very, very deceptive, because what we see is probably 0.005% of what's actually occurring in the universe around us. Our eyes only allow us to perceive what they and the brain together can calculate and make out. Colors. Colors are simply the light that is not absorbed by the object that you are looking at and reflected back at you. So, things work weird. There's all these wavelengths of light, sound that we don't even perceive or understand that are happening around us. What makes us think that there's other things in the universe that are happening around us that we're just so at the top of the food chain that we understand everything, that we're so omnipotent. We don't understand our universe, and there's a lot of things that could be happening. Just like Brian said, with volcanoes. Volcanoes wake up, they do their thing for a while, and then they shut down. What if there are things kind of like Mel's Hole that wake up, do their thing for a while, shut down, and come back later on? I mean, I don't know. There's all kinds of possibilities. And just like Barb said, we can't be shut down to the possibility that there are strange things that we just absolutely don't understand.
Great stuff right there. But first off, I do have to express my displeasure with you giving away my hiding spots. First off, underneath Barb's bed. Like, what the heck now? And then in Brian's closet. Wow, I guess I need some improvements now right there. Thanks, Mr. Prevo. Yet on a serious note, correct me if I'm wrong, I am a nerd, definitely like those analytics. It's roughly around 4,000 miles to the core of the Earth. I don't know how far down Mel claimed he kept going. Yet, I mean, if we really want the answer here, well, there we go, 4,000 miles, give or take.
Well, that would be true if we're not looking at... okay, so 15 miles even of line going down this tube would be unheard of, because the tube or the hole itself would collapse in on itself simply because of the physics of pressure and everything else that happens with gravity and everything involved. But if we're looking at a dimensional rift, then maybe that line that was continuing to pass wasn't necessarily passing for 15 miles in our reality. Maybe it was somewhere else. That's something you got to think about.
Yeah, that's a good point. If it's, our miles in our measurement as humans could be very different. Is this what you're saying then, if this is some sort of portal or whatever, gateway to another sort of time dimension? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, it's always possible. It kind of makes me think of the movie Poltergeist, where they passed through the ball through the closet and they came out the ceiling in the living room. Something like that. Who knows? Maybe the vision line was coming out somewhere else. We don't know. Yeah,
true. Wow, that's a really good point. I don't know if I've ever thought about that. This is just such a weird one, isn't it? And I feel like, okay, it could be, some people say this is just an elaborate hoax cooked up by Art Bell and this supposed guy, Mel Waters, but I don't know, but there is a longevity of this legend and the stories and the people that continue to seek it out. I don't know. Yeah, I think it needs to be explored more. And I know what you were talking about, Robert, that there was evidence of what Mel was describing the area where this hole was, and there was this supposed, outbuilding. And there are images on Google Earth that you can see that does look similar to this. And supposedly, well, this man claims that he went out to see it and he had photos that he had provided. So, I don't know, you can't always, we can't say that because we don't see something, it doesn't exist, right? What about the air that we breathe and wind, does that not exist because we can't see it?
Well, not only that, but as you said, this is going to be a two-parter. So this isn't just a unique anomaly. There's another one to be talked about. So it's not a singular occurrence.
Yeah, it's weird that it's strange that he is involved in the second one, but is it because of his involvement in the first one? That's what we don't know. Is this some kind of, again, ruse, that's going on to perpetuate this hoax, supposedly? We don't know, but this next one is going to be really... Right, Robert. This is very bizarre. Like this, I don't even know what to say.
Yeah, the second one is, because the second one is somewhat similar, especially in size and depth, but it gets a lot weirder, a whole lot weirder.
The reason why, if I remember right, and when I was reading, he got involved because the people that were involved with the second one were perplexed and wanted his input, right?
Yes. That's what supposedly is what happened. Yep, that's what he claims. And it does kind of make sense.
If somebody wants to talk about Bigfoot poop, I've gotten more than one email about what's in my freezer. So
yeah. Oh, Brian, I really hope that never fails you, right?
I don't even know how to explain it. It's like, I hope it's one of those mysteries in a way that remains unsolved, because if I find out it was some 500-pound guy from Wisconsin full of brats, beers, and cheddar wurst, and I've had it in my freezer for that long, I'm going to be really bummed.
Yes, that's right.
Especially if his name was Mel Waters.
Yeah. I know it came out of Mel's hole.
Here's one other thing I wanted to add before we wrap this up as far as Mel Waters. Whenever they do a little bit of background checking on Mel Waters, there was no individual by the name of Mel Waters or Melvin Waters or anyone with the last name Waters who was associated with any of the property in the area. But it does lead me to wonder if maybe this was like an anagram or something, play around with the letters of the word.
Oh.
So I got to playing around with that. You can reorganize Mel Waters and you can come up with the initials M.E. Walters or E.M. Walters. So I was wondering if there might be a Walters that is connected with that property.
Just to be devil's advocate, remember what happened to Bob Lazar, too. The only reason why he still exists was because of a paycheck stub.
Exactly.
Right. And I'm thinking if this man did exist, it would make perfect sense that he's going to disguise his true identity. If this is all true, look what they did, to him. And they made sure that all of his property was seized. That was one of the things that kind of grabbed at my heart when he said, I lost everything. I lost over this dumb hole. I lost everything. I lost my home, my friends, my family. I just lost everything. So any final thoughts, Starbox? Do you have any final thoughts on this?
Again, great stuff by everybody. Different thought processes to try and figure out what is occurring for sure. Again, it's very interesting. It has some traits that match up with, like I said, logic with caves and also other large holes, such as Castle Hauschka. There are obviously layers of the earth that are below us. This all makes sense. Great stuff for sure. I just don't know enough to feel comfortable enough to present whether or not as mentioned by everybody else here, is this fully reality? Is a portion of it reality? Is it something like the Slender Man that had no reality, that was just created as an urban legend? Same thing with like the Black Eyes Children, etc. Or is there something really involved? Great stuff.
Yeah, definitely. Brian, I'm going to ask you if you have, want to make any final observations on this.
Yeah, it's just one of those things that I think part 2 will lend more credibility to it. Because it's the same thing, kind of like Bigfoot. There's, according to what I was reading, if I remember right, the original Mel's orifice was hundreds of years old and had been used for a dumping site. So if it had been used for a dumping site so long, why didn't it fill up? And if a guy chucked his dog down there after he quit breathing and yet he was running through the woods again, how did that happen? And so it's just one of those mysteries of what if.
Yeah, good point. So Robert, I'm going to hand the floor over to you for your final thoughts on this.
I'm curious to see if, absent Mel Waters, if there are any other anomalies very similar to this that have occurred or been reported anywhere else on the planet. This just popped in my head, and I don't know why, but we talk about black holes sometimes too, and we think that black holes are always these super massive things that occur in space that swallow solar system, stars, planets, but they actually, we know scientifically that they occur at a microscopic level and then disappear. Could it be something similar to that? Could it be something that happened down so many layers in the earth and just presented itself this way for a period of time? Like I said, something intermittently, like we were talking about with the volcano thing. And there's just so many questions. And I just wonder if there's anything out there that has happened similarly that just is absent of, Coast to Coast and Art Bell and Mel Waters and, somewhere else, just something to back this up. Because, if it's just an urban legend or just a story, man, it's a great one. It's a lot of fun to think about because it makes you think about your reality. But if it's real, if this really happened, what is that telling us about our universe? And is it that important that maybe we ought to pay a little bit more attention to the idea of it?
Yeah, also the aspect of why is it being covered up, supposedly? Did this all happen with the military, with the government? Why was this covered up? We love to hear from our listeners. Give your opinions down in the comments. What do you all think about this? I'd love to hear that. Robert, before we let you go, can you tell our listeners your podcast, Monstrous, the podcast?
Absolutely. Well, you can find the show on YouTube. You can find it on Rumble. You can find it on Spotify. You can look us up on Facebook. You can find some of our shorts on TikTok. Once in a while, I'll throw something up on Instagram. What we do a lot of more than anything is the Cryptid Field Guide, and that's where we go one by one. If you're interested in the Loch Ness Monster and you want to find out something about that, we have an episode specifically on the Loch Ness Monster. If you're into Sasquatch, we've got Sasquatch. If you're into the Appalachian Devil Dogs, we've got that. So we try and cover all those things. I think we're up to like 36, 38 episodes on the on the Cryptid Field Guide. As far as Monstrous, the podcast, where I sit and talk to wonderful people like Barb, Brian, and Kenny, we do that intermittently, and it's kind of as I can get somebody to show up and put up with me for about an hour and get them to talk about all their wonderful experiences. And that's where I get to ask the questions that I think maybe the audience would want to ask, but doesn't really have the opportunity to ask. But we try to have fun no matter what we do.
That just sounds like I know that it is. These are great shows. So you guys, if you're not familiar, look them up. And so with that, I want to just thank everybody for joining us here at Camp Nightmare Fuel. If you enjoyed this dive into the strange legend of Mel's Hole, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss an episode. And you definitely want to come back for the second episode and all the more bizarre information we're going to share on that one. Please share our show with your friends who also love mysterious but true topics.